Underground deliveries with Wendy's, Sweetgreen's got Spicy, and what is your loyalty program costing you? That's all ahead on this week's Digital Restaurant. The digital restaurant works like this. We're going to ask each other 5 questions about headlines that have caught our attention on the worlds of restaurants, off-premise, and technology that in some way tie back to our book series, Delivering the Digital Restaurant. Are you ready? Let's go. Good morning, Meredith. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you, Carl?
I'm very good. I'm in the Windy City right now at the National Restaurant Show, and my feet are tired. That's actually the truth. My feet are tired. This is a huge show, and I've met a lot of great people and been enjoying sampling some of the great things that are on offer here in Chicago. But let's get going with this week's episode. Lots to talk about. The first one is about an article we saw on understanding the cost of loyalty. I think Zach was involved in this. So tell us, what were your learnings?
Yeah, Zach Goldstein of Thanks. He's a smart guy, and I love reading everything that he writes. Of course, he wrote that original article back in the day, The Four Horsemen of the Restaurant Apocalypse, which was very prescient. He and I share a heritage at Bain & Company. He talks about that in this article and the power of lifetime value of customers and how retaining a customer is so much more valuable than acquiring a new one. We increasingly, as we learn to understand the data in the restaurant space, are starting to learn that the point of it is to learn who's coming into your restaurant and how to get them to come back more frequently. So the whole article is about how most loyalty programs in the restaurant space historically have really been rewards programs and have been extremely expensive. And not expensive in the sense of how much are you spending on a SaaS license fee to have the software, but expensive in terms of the actual redemptions. And what was really interesting to me about this article is, again, he compared it to travel and said, look, for those of you who are in airline loyalty schemes, you probably value more the ability to get upgraded to first class, which costs the airline nothing. They were flying the plane anyway, and that seat was going to be empty. Now, they might give you the ability to get a free plane ticket, and that feels like a discount. And they're able to flex those so that if it's something everyone wants and a really expensive day to fly, it's almost impossible to get a miles ticket. If you're flying at a time when they've got tons of empty seats and the plane's going to be flying anyway, again, it costs them nothing. They go down. They really manipulate those points to make it much less costly for them. Restaurants need to get to a point where they do the same thing, where they're creating other versions of loyalty, whether it's access to items or experiences or merchandise, or they're creating this sort of flex redemption and flex earning potential that allows them to reduce what Zach refers to as the effective discount rate of that loyalty program. So really interesting article. I think it is a great way to think about loyalty in the restaurant space and a great way to think about using all the data that we're getting.
Sounds fascinating. I think e-commerce opens up so many doors, doesn't it, to just do this differently and to do it more effectively and to have some fun as well. And I think once restaurants really figure that out, it's going to be pretty exciting to see the high levels of consumer engagement that follows.
Okay, next question is for you, Carl. I know that you have gotten to do something pretty fun out there in Chicago while you've been there and actually see Sweetgreen's Spyce acquisition in action. So tell us about what you saw.
Yes, it was about a 45-minute journey out of the central Chicago to actually go and visit their Naperville location. And you're right, it is their Spyce takeover that we're talking about here. We refer to Spyce, of course, as the acquisition of the robotics company that they did in 2021, but it's actually called their Infinite Kitchen, where they're trying to bring a frictionless experience for customers to be able to see how they can engage with making their own salad in a very customizable and fun way. And I absolutely did record a video. But before I show my video, let's just see the nice fancy video that they put out, and I'll share that with everyone first.
We call it the Infinite Kitchen, a new kitchen that helps us simplify things so we can bring in more of what matters. For a Sweetgreen experience that's fast, fresh, and friendly, where every meal begins and ends with human hands, from our local farmers to our team members, all there to guide you through the process. We're excited to introduce you to a brand new Sweetgreen.
That's what they said. And let me show you now what I said, because I can tell you I had a fun time.
So they make a big deal in their video, Carl, about human hands being involved and that it's not a totally mechanized process. Was that your experience?
Yeah, it was. Look, I think it was fun. That's the first thing I'll say. It was fun. It was different. It was engaging. It was fast. It definitely was frictionless. And I think the way in which they've allowed the consumer to be engaged on the conveyor approach all the way down the process makes you feel like you're not missing something as well. But there were definitely people around. This didn't feel like one of those labor cut exercises. This was more about just enhancing the experience of eating out. And I think Sweetgreen are definitely onto something here.
To be honest, I secretly hope that eventually it does cut labor costs because I would love to see automation used in restaurants to bring better and more food to people at a lower cost.
Well, before we move on to our next question, I must ask our viewers, our listeners, to subscribe to the Digital Restaurant Podcast if you haven't. Sometimes you'll actually hear us through LinkedIn. Sometimes you might find us through YouTube or our own website. But if you haven't yet subscribed, do us a favor. Please subscribe. Click on the little bell. Subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform, whatever way you'd prefer to. But if you do that, that's really helpful for us. So let's move on. Question 3, Grubhub have announced that they're handing out more customer data. Now, we know the marketplaces, Meredith, get a lot of attention about not only the fees, but also the way in which they hold customer data. So are Grubhub doing something particularly special here?
Well, it's interesting. I would say it is early days of sharing information. They're not giving out customer level data, like that actual detailed individual customer data. They are giving customer segmentation data. And at this point in time, very basic segments. It's, are they a Grubhub Plus member? Are they not? And are they a new customer to that restaurant or a repeat? So you start somewhere, you got a little bit of information. I think that's good, but you can imagine what this could become. And if you go back to the chapter in our book called Mind Data that talks about restaurants becoming e-commerce companies and what kind of data e-commerce companies use, you could imagine this getting to a point where, number one, as a restaurateur, you can measure ROAS, that is return on ad spend, and you can see I spent ad dollars here and this is what happened. And did I get the ROAS that I need to justify continued ad spend? Then number 2, you would be able to spend your ad dollars in very segmented places, the way you do on, say, Facebook or Google or LinkedIn, as you go in and you find just those audiences that you really want to reach out to. And that will then enable A/B testing so that restaurants can start to say, oh, I get the highest ROAS in this segment with this type of message. I should do more of that, right? So while the Grubhub announcement doesn't take us all the way to that end state vision, you can see how these baby steps towards it could get us to a place where restaurants are much more sophisticated e-commerce marketing companies.
And ultimately, I suspect it will encourage restaurants to see how they can be a good partner as well with third parties, recognizing that a bunch of customers are going to want to stay on third parties.
For sure. Yeah. Those guys that are bought into these loyalty programs, whether it's Dash Pass, Uber One, Grubhub Plus, they have every reason in the world to order on those platforms. And so figuring out how to get the most out of those platforms to access those consumers, I think is an important thing for restaurants. Okay, Carl, Wendy's, it seems like they're trying things all the time. And they had some news both on pullback and on lean in the last 2 weeks here. So share with us what they're doing.
I couldn't agree more. I think they're doing some fabulous things. Of course, we've reported on them in the last year or so with relation to their relationship with Reef. But in the last few weeks, they've announced that they're pulling back from that relationship and they're focusing on other items. But that isn't putting an end to innovation at Wendy's. If anything, they're steamrolling into the future with plenty of other things. So there are 2 elements I wanted to touch on here, Meredith, quite honestly, because first of all, last year they announced a relationship with Google and using Google to help test a drive-through chatbot. I believe that started in June in Ohio, and this chatbot is really there to enhance the ordering experience for customers using AI technology, which is something we've talked about in the past as well. And it's around providing personalized recommendations. And they're going to just test this in 2 locations at first, and it will be a chatbot digital display at the drive-through. So, nothing too different beyond that. But the chatbot is there to try and improve order accuracy and speed, and therefore also reduce wait times. Now, I'm curious about this because you've got a bit of experience with drive-through as well. They're hoping, according to the Wall Street Journal at least, to try and get order accuracy to 85%, which, again, according to that same newspaper, is about 5% higher than what McDonald's thought was particularly poor at 80% when they tested this last year. So, is 85% a good number? I don't know. But it's interesting to see they're at least exploring this. And we know there's plenty going on in this space. Presto have been doing things with Checkers. CKE have been testing with 3 different providers as well. So it seems to me like drive-through AI and technology in that space is definitely an area of focus in 2023. So we'll keep our eyes peeled on that. But it's not just that they've been in the news for. They've also been in the news for something around underground food delivery. Now, I don't mean underhanded food delivery. This is, and it's probably best for me to bring up a picture here. This is in relation to a company that we featured last year called Pipedream. But in the context of last year's report, we said about Pipedream helping food get into people's homes. Well, this is a little bit less of a pipe dream. This is about getting the food from the Wendy's restaurant into some pickup cabins, if you will, right by the front of the store. So it's a enhanced pickup experience, I guess, is what they're trying to do here. And I think it's a fascinating one. I don't know whether the economics of something like this will stack up relative to a pickup shelf or two, but it's certainly driving, again, more innovative thinking, and for them to really think about how can they drive more traffic, drive more theatre into the off-premise experience, and enabling guests not just to experience drive-through and pick up in the traditional ways that we've come used to.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, what I love about this is you aren't pushing the envelope unless some of the things you try don't work, right? And that they keep trying new and interesting things. And even when you say, yeah, maybe Reef wasn't what we wanted to do, well, we've got some new things that we're going to experiment with. And I think that's just wonderful. And says a lot about Wendy's, but honestly says a lot about the restaurant industry generally, that it is constantly trying new things and seeking better ways of serving the consumer, which makes it a fun place to be.
I think that's right. And it's so important to have the innovation mindset at times like now. And clearly the team over at Wendy's have got that. Okay, last question. Another acquisition in this space, which I suspect it won't be the last of 2023, but Deliverect have acquired a company called ChatFood. Who are ChatFood, and what do you think's going on here?
So we all know Deliverect. They're an order aggregator, one of the leading order aggregators actually in the world. They're a much more global company than US centric. For those of our listeners who are here in the US, you've probably never heard of ChatFood, but they work in 3,000 restaurant locations in the Middle East. So they are not an insubstantial company, and they enable ordering through things like pay at table, through social ordering, which I'm imagining is how they got their start, and hence the name ChatFood. And I think what we're seeing here is the order aggregators realizing they need to play a much bigger role than just sucking in orders from the third parties and putting them all on one tablet, which was their original business. That was hugely important 3-5 years ago. But now the third parties are integrating directly into so many POSs that having a tablet that brings in all the different third-party orders, maybe not quite as important. You're also seeing both Uber and DoorDash become stronger and stronger and stronger. Postmates essentially almost going away. Through the Uber acquisition, it's basically becoming Uber, and Grubhub as a percentage of total orders getting smaller and smaller as well. So you've got concentration among these two players in the US. You're seeing that in other countries as well. And then you've got direct integration with POS. Well, in a world like that, why do you need Deliverect? What is it for, right? Why do you need Ordermark? Why do you need Chowly? And so we've started to see these companies really diversify and get into other things. I think Ordermark was first, becoming Nextbite and rolling virtual brands into what they do. Then we had Chowly recently acquiring Koala, which was a first-party ordering platform. We reported on that a few weeks ago. And now with Deliverect, they're essentially creating a multi-pronged way for consumers to get orders into restaurants, whether it's first-party ordering or social media ordering or third-party ordering, and to have those all come into one place. So a very interesting acquisition. I think it probably says as much about the underlying Deliverect business as it does about the future.
Great stuff. Well, look, another full episode this week, Meredith. Thank you for your time, and thank you to you for joining us. Hopefully you've enjoyed this week's edition. Would love to hear your comments, your thoughts about what we've covered. And If you've got any thoughts around what you'd like us to cover in a future edition, please do get in touch. But until next time, thanks for listening. The Digital Restaurant Podcast is available for you to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Watch us, rate us, and subscribe to The Digital Restaurant on YouTube, and follow along on all our social media digital restaurant channels. Thanks for listening.